Good afternoon, everyone. To our webinar, Labor Market Integration of People Fleeing War in Ukraine, Expectations, Challenges, and Opportunities. My name is Martin Wagner. I'm Senior Policy Advisor at ICMPD's Policy Unit, and I will moderate this webinar together with my colleague, Justina Frelag.
Good afternoon.
While people are still coming in, a few introductory words from my side. On 24 February, the Russian invasion to Ukraine started, and as a consequence of the war, in less than 5 weeks, thousands were killed, cities, homes, and livelihoods were destroyed, and millions of people are displaced. Close to 4 million people fled the war to EU member states. And to come up with swift, pragmatic, and unbureaucratic solutions, the EU triggered, as most of you know, the Temporary Protection Directive for people fleeing the war in Ukraine on 4th March 2022. With temporary protection triggered, people fleeing the war have a legal status in EU member states and have immediate access to education, health insurance, and also the labor market. And while people fleeing the war, first and foremost, of course, need safety and a place to stay, but they are already seeking how they can contribute and make a living in the new places where they stay. In today's webinar, we want to have a closer look about what the promise of this immediate labor market access for Ukrainians means in different EU member states, whether and how this promise can be held from the sides of receiving countries, and what is done in order to make this immediate access really happen. This webinar is organized in the context of 2 EU-funded Horizon 2020 projects, Traffic and Spring. In Traffic, we investigate long-lasting displacement situations and analyze options to improve displaced people's life with a focus on the roles of networks and mobility. And the Spring project gathers available research and evidence on integration in the context of large-scale movements of refugees and other migrants to Europe since 2014. So both projects are interlinked with solutions, with people, how they can enter and access services in countries when they had to leave their countries of origin because of war. We are delighted to have a very big panel today with us. And we have panelists from the Commission's DG Employment and panelists from Austria, Germany, Lithuania, and Poland, each viewing their respective labor markets from slightly different angles. So with us today, I will shortly go through our panelists. We have Lambert Kleinman from European Commission, Directorate General Employment, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities. He is Deputy Head of Unit of the Labor Mobility Unit Portal at DG Employment. Hello, Lambert.
Hello.
Also from DG Employment, we have Dennis van Gessel, who has been working primarily on tools and instruments to support migrants in showcasing their skills and qualifications. Hi, Dennis.
Hello.
From Austria, we have Marlies Gatterbauer. She's Deputy Head at the Head Office of the Public Employment Service Austria and is responsible for labor market-related analysis, researches and inquiries, especially in the area of labor market situation of refugees. And Anita Erhardt, who works as Equal Opportunities and Diversity Officer at the Office of the Public Employment Service here in Vienna. Hello, Marlies, and hello, Anita.
Hello.
Hello.
From Lithuania, we have Ms. Jone Kalendiene. She's Head of Research and Analysis Division at Enterprises Lithuania. Enterprise Lithuania aims to help Lithuanian business and entrepreneurs to start and to expand their activities locally and abroad. Hi, Jon.
Um,
Then we further have Marlene Thiele. She's project lead of the German Netzwerk Unternehmen integrieren Flüchtlinge, so Network Enterprises Integrate Refugees. The network was initiated by the Association of German Chambers of Commerce and Industry and the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy in 2016, with the goals to provide information about employment of refugees and so on. Hello, Marlene.
Hello there, thanks for having me.
And finally, we have Mr. Michael Adamski. He's a chief specialist in the Labor Migration Policy Division at the Polish Ministry of Family and Social Policy, where he focuses on monitoring, analysis, and assessment of migration processes. Glad to have you with us, Michael.
Hello.
Before we start, I would like to encourage all our listeners to post questions. You can do that with the Q&A button. For those following us via YouTube, please also feel free to enter your questions there. We will monitor both platforms and collect your questions for a final round to our panelists, where we want to summarize and bring together these questions. Before that, we want to have 2 rounds of questions where we address each of the panelists with one specific question. And I think with no further ado, I would like to start. And I would like to start with Lambert. Lambert, the Commission issued on 23rd March, so last week, a communication on welcoming those fleeing war in Ukraine, readying Europe to meet the needs. The communication dedicates a chapter on access to jobs. And I would ask you to a bit summarize what the Commission is currently doing to support member states in preparing labor markets and to help to integrate those who flee the war in Ukraine into the labor markets, and also to see whether this promise of immediate access to jobs can be a reality. Please, Lambert.
Thank you very much, Martin, and good afternoon to everyone. I have only limited time, so I can only give you some sort of flavor what we are doing in the Commission, but I will talk as well about the, let's say, more general EU level, because it's not only the Commission working on solutions right now. And as a second part, I would like to focus on the activities that the PES are doing currently. So we have recently started a survey on that. So let's jump immediately in. So the EU and its member states have really undertaken swift action focusing on helping people who arrive to the EU to feel secure, to have access to food and housing, healthcare, social protection, and school and education. I think this is really important. Even if we now talk about access to labor market, most people fleeing the war in Ukraine have more basic problems right now. I don't want to say that they do not want to work, but you have maybe not as a first priority the access to the labor market. So the numbers are increasing every day. So I think it should be around 4 million people who arrived now. Maybe it's more, who knows? So when I say it's not only the Commission, it's the entire EU, and I think I should say that this is really something very special. It's a strong sign of solidarity among European member states, and actually, there's one of the Directorate Generals of the Commission has put in place something what they call the solidarity platform, and this is actually a gathering quite often actually between member states and Commission, where they coordinate action and help each other. So this is really something very operational, which is probably the most important thing right now to do, that we coordinate our activities, be it access to labor market, be it healthcare or housing or whatsoever. So I don't think I need to talk too much about the Temporary Protection Directive. I come back to it, but Martin already said something. The other point that I would like to make is the Commission, and this is in the role as the one who makes the legislative proposals. has made several legislative proposals for access to funding. One, probably you have heard about it, is called CARE, Cohesion Actions for Refugees in Europe. This is still in the Council. We hope that it's adopted very soon, so it allows certain to use certain unused funds, quite a lot actually, and reprogramming of activities and so on. So once we have that, in place, I think we have made a lot of funding available to pay for some of the basic needs, and if I'm not completely wrong, some of the activities could be even funded up to 100%. Now let me come quickly to the labor market integration. Even if it's maybe not the most important thing today, but certainly in the next weeks it will come up. And it's really important that, and I think the composition of the panel reflects that a bit, that the public employment services take a strong role there, because we do not want these people fleeing the war in Ukraine to disappear in undeclared work or labor exploitation. So the more we can put into regular employment with good contracts and fair pay and so on, the better. Okay, so maybe just one word about the current rules. You know these temporary protection directive probably a bit. There are some other rules that apply as well. So under the current rules, and I assume you know that Ukrainian nationals are visa-free travelers. They have the right to travel for 90 days freely in the Union before they apply for before they register under the temporary protection directive. So if someone is today in Poland and does not register immediately because he thinks he needs to go to Portugal because the rest of his family is there, this is possible, which is, I think, something to be kept in mind for any kind of labor market integration. So they are able to, basically they are able to choose the member state in which they want to trigger their rights, which does not mean that there's a right for free movement of workers, but these are some legal issues, but it's something very similar. So let's say the next point, and maybe that's the most important one I want to talk about, is what the PES, the public employment services, are doing in the network of public employment services. I have some colleagues here from the Austrian PES, they know things better, what you do on the ground. But so tomorrow there's a meeting of the representatives of the public employment services, a special meeting to talk about only what the network can do in helping the situation. We have, as a short input to this meeting, we have made a survey, and I would like to give you just a few main messages there. So most press actually think it's too early to talk about labor market integration, because they cannot really see already. They cannot see already how many clients they actually have. So hardly anyone has made an estimate how many of the currently present people from Ukraine are ready for the labor market or are willing to integrate into the labor market. So there are hardly any estimates or forecasts available. What is as well interesting, some PES are as well involved in the welcome centers. They work very closely with the government, with NGOs and municipalities. So it's not only a job of public employment services, it's really a partnership approach. Important is as well that the access to PES measures is immediately available once they trigger the temporary protection mechanism. So once they have triggered these, they can have all kind of PES support. That doesn't mean that they don't have the PES support that is online available, but let's say the measures will become available to them only then. We have asked as well if there are specific measures foreseen. Most PES thought that the existing active labor market ALMP measures are enough for the time being. Some plan new measures, and I leave that to the countries here gathered around the table to explain that. But most of them, or quite basically all of them, highlight the importance of language training. So the integration into the labor market will only work with language. So, and some PES have already offered some information in Ukrainian, and some have dedicated counselors. Some others have made an attempt to translate some of the job vacancies. I think I stop here there because my last message is we discuss tomorrow with the PES what they need in terms of support from the network on bilateral basis, on network basis, or from the Commission or from whomever. And after that, we will continue this exchange, and we have some special meetings of the heads of PES foreseen later in May and June. So by then, I think we will have a nice program in place, and I think I stop here. Sorry if I was too long. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you, Lambert. I think, yeah, I quite agree. But as I said in the introduction, this first arrival is most important, and I think this is also what we see. But I think also that we need to soon look forward and what it means to have so many people here who might come and sooner than later come into the labor market. And I already saw also a question in the Q&A about free movement of workers and how this will work under the temporary protection. I think we will come back to this a bit later. But I would like to continue with Mikael right now. Now, your country, Poland, is not only has received a significant number, close to 2 million in the meantime. I think this is actually more than your capital Warsaw has inhabitants. Now, picking up probably on what Lambert said, do you already have some indications, or do you have some estimates how many people you expect from those who arrived right now in Poland will access the labor market in Poland, and probably also what would be the requirements for them to enter the labor market? Mikael, please.
Yes, hello. Well, first of all, I would like to say that for sure we are experiencing the biggest humanitarian crisis in the post-war Europe. What about estimations? Well, I have to say that the situation is very dynamic, and we are not able to give any precise estimates on how many people from Ukraine will come to Poland. Now it is even more than 2 million. It's 2,003,000 persons, and so on. The scale of this inflow is enormous, and most of the immigration experts in Poland say that this crisis is not a short temporary, and it may last for a long time. And very often in general public appears the sentence that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. The marathon of for help those people. And as a representative of ministry, I may say that Polish government faced the dilemma what to do with such scale of inflow, and there were two possibilities. First was to maintain the use of current procedures dedicated to refugees and related to granting international protection under the existing rules. Or another solution was to make it more flexible. And of course, government chose the second solution, and the result of this decision was a new special law, which was focused on ensuring access to the healthcare system and to family benefits, and especially to the labor market. And what we do now, we are monitoring the situation in the offices, in the employment offices, and we are still not ready to give estimates for the future. So, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I think when you addressed that it is not clear how many stay in here and how to deal with several things, I think this is something that we saw in many member states so far already. That there are some preparations, but there's a lot of insecurity there. And I think this is what we also see with the whole notion of this temporary protection, that how to implement it. And at national level, there's quite a lot of uncertainties still on. And probably with regard to this, I would like to ask you, Jone, with regard to the situation in Lithuania, do you see that Lithuania is prepared for having Ukrainians entering the labor market? Also, where do you see the biggest chances and challenges that you see ahead of us of this task? But probably first of all, have a few words about your organization you work, Enterprise Lithuania. Please, the floor is yours, Jone.
Thank you. Yeah, Enterprise Lithuania works with Lithuanian business, usually small and medium size, helping in whatever the question they may need. And talking about our organization, we also have a support for Ukrainians, namely, we help to transfer the business from Ukraine to Lithuania if they wish and if they need. We also help for all the individual, for the startups from Ukraine. Now they are somewhere in Europe or even in Lithuania, and how to organize their activities, how to raise the funds. And in general, we are trying to help Ukrainian business if they address to us in the same way we do with Lithuanian business. Also, one more maybe issue, talking or coming to the question whether Lithuania was ready. So of course we were not ready at the time it happened, but I think that especially from the legislative side, or what the governments should do is to guarantee all the laws, all the environment that could be favorable. So I think we are quite ready now, in terms that when Ukrainians register in migration office, they are allowed to be employed at the moment. So it means there are they don't need to do anything extra or anything additionally. Also, they are allowed to be self-employed. So that's where our organization is helping, because we have our central office in the capital, but we also have 13 offices all around the country, in order to help to start the business, to help a person to know what issues they need to do, where to address, and all the things. So we have this. In general, all the Ukrainians can work legally if they wish. Second thing, I think, which is also important, we have a bilateral agreement between countries, which says that when Ukrainians work here, all their working or employment period, as well as their earnings, will be counted in Ukraine for their retirement. So this, what I again think is very important, knowing that, okay, now we are in some extraordinary situation, and that employment here would be counted in Ukraine whenever they will come back. Probably that's the legislative side. Of course, our labor office is also working a lot in organizing fairs where Ukrainians meet the companies. And I just read a few hours ago, there was an announcement that there are already more Ukrainians willing to work comparing to the number of official positions labor office has. According to the data of labor office, it was the data of the end of previous week. there were 1,500 Ukrainians already employed with the help of labor office. Okay, numbers probably are not big because we're not such very big country. But I think the number is way bigger, counting on how many Ukrainians are already employed, because there are private initiatives and not everyone is using the service of labor office. I know there are the initiatives of private companies, the initiatives, personal initiatives. When you know you have what to say, a Ukrainian family which you take care about, and then you help them usually them to find the job. So I also know that there are people, Ukrainian people, who would be counted as self-employed, but we so far don't have data somewhere in one place that we could say how many of them are already self-employed, because their professions are like that, which would be counted as self-employment. So I would say that there are probably about 2,000 out of 19,000, which is the number of refugees at the moment at the working age. So there is still quite a big number, which we are facing, and which we need to deal with. Probably the biggest challenge, what the companies are saying, is the language, for sure. It's not that we can fit any job, even though if we know how to do it. But we see very good initiatives. The labor office of the National Labor Office itself employed several Ukrainians, so they can help the refugees. There are also private HR agencies, which also does the same. Different services, manufacturing, where they organize on purpose. They try to organize the shifts so that people working in the same shift with Ukrainians could speak the same language, because in Lithuania we don't speak everyone Russian, not anymore. And that's again the challenge for employers to organize everything so that people would feel comfortable. I think that's the biggest issue. Maybe one thing that we still need to do is to find out how to accept the diplomas and recognize the diplomas where it is needed. When we talk about teachers in schools, also medical care workers, which is very important, because these are the sectors also which could employ quite normal share of refugees, as in general we are in shortage of labor, so which could be very helpful. But there are some certain steps that needs to be done. Talking about education, actually the Minister of Education already issued the law, which says that at least the teachers don't need to know the native language, the local language at the moment, which is one of the things to help. This is the excuse for 2 years, so they can stay here for 2 years and work as a teacher without knowing Lithuanian. And we will see how it's gonna be after 2 years. So I think, that's the most important issues.
Thank you, Jone. I think what I've also realized from your intervention right now is also that again this promise of non-bureaucracy under the temporary protection is somehow true, but also not completely true. There's a lot of implementing legal acts to be done in order to facilitate this whole immediate access, for example, to the labor market. That is one of the key things that the Temporary Protection Directive actually makes. But I think it's a good point over here also to move over to Marlies and Anita from the Austrian Public Employment Service. Because we heard now from Jone that there's actually no barriers to access the labor market in Lithuania. I would like to ask you, how does it work now in Austria? Is this direct access to the Austrian labor market possible? And where do you see the current challenges so far? And of course, again, it is still not many that already most likely address the public employment service, but still, how do you see it coming?
Yeah, good afternoon. I firstly would like to briefly refer to the AMS as organization. We have one head office in Vienna, there I'm working for. Then we have 9 regional offices, like the Public Employment Service Vienna, where Anita is working for. And we have about 104 local offices where we are supporting our job seekers and our employers. What are we offering? We are offering information and advice, job referrals, German language courses, training and further education classes, special offers for women, information on childcare. Now to come to your question, Martin, concerning the labor market access for Ukrainians. In Austria, it's a little bit different. In order to be registered with the labor market service, person from the Ukraine, they need the blue residence card for refugees. And this blue card is issued by the Federal Office for Immigration and Asylum. And it's a temporary right of residence, and this is valid until the 3rd March 2023. And this is automatically extended by 6 months at a time, but for a maximum of 1 year. And before people from Ukraine can begin a new job, they additionally need the work permit. And this must be issued by the AMS as well. So actually they need 2 things, the blue residence card and the work permit. And if the person has the prospect of a job, whether arranged by the AMS or found by themselves, the new employer will submit the work permit application to the AMS. And registration with the AMS is not a condition for the issuance of a work permit. And we suggest if people from Ukraine speak little or no German at all, to bring an adult with them to the first visit to the AMS in order to translate for them. So these are the labor market access conditions in Austria. You asked us also about the chances and the challenges we see. At the national level, I think Lambert mentioned it before as well. The primary challenge is to ensure adapt the necessary infrastructure to take care of refugees in the areas of housing, school, health, and work, and to offer German language courses in order to facilitate the social and economic integration as quickly as possible. Relating to the labor market, the following question arises. Companies are interested in the Ukrainian people coming, but are they really prepared to employ a person who does not yet speak German or hardly any German at all? Can they deal with this? And since many women come with children to us, the question arises also whether Austria is adequately equipped for childcare and education. This is another question that's quite important. And the third challenge we see is that people want to stay in the cities, but the jobs are also interesting jobs are in the federal states. So how can we motivate them to also see the privilege to live in the federal states? The chance that also a big chance we see, it is assumed that the refugees from Ukraine are well educated, have some knowledge of foreign languages, and the alphabetized in the Latin alphabet. So the well qualified staff can contribute to meeting the demand for skilled workers in Austria. This is a chance we see. And then we have the point to see a chance and a challenge. Many refugees from Ukraine will probably have to take up dequalified employment for the time being, as the final pressure will be high at the beginning. However, it should be pointed out that the temporarily taking up a dequalified employment is a better solution than remaining unemployed all the time. And suitable employment often requires corresponding language skills or additional qualification, which can take a longer time. So this is our view from Austria. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlies and Anita. I took immediately also, of course, the slight changes, differences between Austria and Lithuania with regard to access to labor market. I think this, the blue card, I think this is in basically all countries. I think that you need some kind of course, some kind of residence, which is manifests more or less the temporary protection that is given. I think this is mostly the same. Also thankful, and this is also something that I think we see in refugee movements generally. People hardly enter the qualifications that they bring actually with them. And I think this will be also a challenge to have. I think Jone also before mentioned it with qualification of the recognition of the qualifications that people bring with them. I think this brings me quite nicely to you, Marlene, because I think that what we also heard, there is quite some unclarity or information need that employers have also. And you work for das Netzwerk, what are the current most common questions that you get from employers regarding people from Ukraine? And probably you can also tell a bit more about das Netzwerk in general. Please, Marlene.
Thank you, Martin. Well, in fact, we can see a difference and a development in the questions that we are asked over the last weeks. Actually, our project is aimed to provide information. That's one of our main goals for employers who are either working with refugees or are looking into working with them. And as you've mentioned, we were funded in 2016, so the so-called refugee crisis that was the reason for implementing our project was, of course, the one we knew before, where the legal framework was quite a bit different. So this is an interesting time for us now, as there are still fairly large numbers of refugees coming from the, I call them well-known countries that we've seen over the last years coming to Germany. And then there's this very large number of a very short term of refugees coming from Ukraine, even though it's, of course, much less than the numbers that we see in Poland, but still they are bigger than we've seen over this short amount of time, even in 2016, where refugee numbers in Germany were comparably big for Germany and for Europe and the world in general. Coming back to the question, how have these questions changed that we have seen? I'd say in the first half of March, employers contacted us mainly with questions about opportunities to volunteer and to help. Keep in mind, the companies that we are in contact with are those that have been quite active over the last years and who have quite a bit of experience in working with refugees and have been very inclined to help all over these years. So of course they are now as well, and they were looking into volunteering, donating money, but also medical equipment, food, organizing transport to the Ukrainian borders, all those kinds of things. And then when the first refugees arrived in Germany, I think we've seen the first shift where questions about humanitarian needs came into perspective. So mainly those were questions about providing living spaces. We've seen, for example, large hospital chains or a lot of hotel chains who have cleared whole floors in their buildings to provide living spaces or flats. And now more and more questions about employment come into perspective. Those, I think, that's my experience, didn't play a big role. In the beginning, I have the impression that companies were really careful not to emphasize this topic very much, because in Germany, as well as we've heard about many of the other European countries present right now, shortage of skilled labor, and to be honest, shortage of labor in general is quite a big issue. It's one that's really concerning for German companies. So I think this was a reason why companies were very careful not to make this link too quickly, as to avoid to say there's a war in Ukraine on the one side and we see a chance to solve the problem here right now. and to keep in mind that humanitarian questions were clearly on the forefront. But now we more and more see a bit of a shift. And that's also, I think, because more and more people arriving from Ukraine from Germany, in Germany, are now settling in and are making clear themselves that in fact seeking employment is quite an important step for them, and to find work is also a chance to just find some sense of normalcy and productiveness in this disrupted life they are living right now. So this is also getting more and more important for the companies that we are talking about, and the questions are mainly those regarding the legal framework. Actually, the answers we can give are much more easy than they were before, and they are right now as well, because they are still, as I've said, asylum seekers that are not from Ukraine and that are not living under this framework of temporary protection. So temporary protection makes things a lot easier than they are for asylum seekers in the asylum system we've known before. But this is actually not really well known for a lot of employers. This is very new, and the fact that this is a bit easier is not well known for many, so there's still a big need for information. Of course, there are questions that we've heard a lot about right now concerning language courses, concerning support, and of course, all these questions regarding housing are still very prevalent. More than half of the refugees from Ukraine arrived in Berlin, where I'm calling from right now as well. So a very small part of Germany has very big numbers of people coming here, and the housing market in Berlin has been very tense before. So this is, I think, one of the main hurdles at the moment. So you also asked questions, are there already people working? How's employment looking in Germany? And about this, I think I can answer with a careful yes, because this is what we are talking about right now a lot with our companies. Is there actually employment finding place already? Where are there Ukrainian refugees in work already? And this is something that's quite recent, because it needs the working permit, which comes with the temporary protection. In fact, as soon as you apply for temporary protection, you get in German it's called Fiktionsbescheinigung, quite a bureaucratic word, which is a preliminary certification that you have applied. And with that, quite automatically, you also receive a working permit. So being able to work is something that can find place quite quickly. But if we are talking about Berlin, as the numbers are quite high here, the immigration offices have made it possible to apply for the temporary protection in mid-March. There's actually now an online tool available to apply, which has been going live on March 18th. So the numbers coming in for people who are allowed to work are just rising and rising right now. In other parts of Germany, of course, this is a bit quicker because the numbers aren't as high. So there is where we have seen first contracts being signed, and the numbers are now slowly rising. That's what we see.
Thank you. I think you also pointed us to the fact that people are concentrated very much in several cities, in a number of cities, like also Marlies said before with regard to Austria, and how to make this distribution also of labor force in a way possible. I think this leads also very nicely. Marlene, can you turn off? I hear myself. Thank you. Also leads us very nicely to a question that was also put in the Q&A whether there's already a rough profile of skills and qualifications of Ukrainian refugees who arrive here, whether there's already some information there. And I think this is a good bridge to Dennis, as you work specifically on skills profiling at the Skills Agenda Unit in DG Employment. Yeah, can you tell us a bit about the instruments that are there actually to do skills profiling, but also matching, to probably have this idea that was just mentioned before, that people are in one place, but probably the job is in another one, how this can be done? And yeah, what do we know about the labor market demands? I think Marlene said it before. There is a demand in jobs, and what do we know there? Is it similar in each country, the kind of demands, or where do you see here a possibility of matching? Please, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so on skills profiling, I can start and say a number of things we are doing. First of all, on skills profiling, we have a dedicated tool developed in 2017 already, which is called the EU Skills Profile Tool for third country nationals. And this tool can be used to map and document skills and experiences of migrants and refugees. And this has been used in the last 5 years already by a number of organizations providing support to refugees to land on the labor market. It is a multilingual tool with consisting of a questionnaire where you can see 2 questions at the same time on the screen, and the output is a sort of a skills profile which can be used to refer the individuals to next services, like, for example, a public employment service or a recognition center to recognize your diplomas. What we recently did with this tool is to add the Ukrainian language to the questionnaire of the tool, and we managed to do it pretty quick. So this went operational last week, and indeed now we're seeing that the tool is used in settings where Ukrainians are being supported, not to a very large scale, but of course this has to grow in time, and we're also promoting this feature to organizations that are supporting Ukrainians, and of course also other third country nationals in their endeavors to integrate in the labor market. In terms of the skills profiles, it's too early to say what kind of people have already used this tool, but we will be able to give more information at a later stage. We know that the tool usually is being used by medium-skilled people, but one of the recent improvements we have managed to add to the tool is to make it more flexible in use. So now you can tailor the questionnaire of the tool to local needs. So you can add or hide questions that are part of the tool from your screen, to tailor it to local circumstances, and also to tailor to the background of the individual that's being supported. And then yeah, it's up to the organizations that are supporting refugees to use this feature, but it's there, and we are also trying to connect the outputs of the tool to the Europass portal, so that you can use the output of the questionnaire, the skills profile, as a starting point in the Europass portal to maybe draft a CV in that portal, which is one of the most important features of that tool. Also, something else, and I will keep it short on this, but European Commission is also working on a sort of EU talent pool being managed by DG Home colleagues, and also their pilots will be exercised with people from Ukraine, and this is still a work in progress, but the idea of this talent pool is also to make connections happening between Ukrainians in the EU with vacancies in Europe. skill shortages and how we visualize these, maybe a nice bridge. We are having a number of instruments to help us in visualizing skill shortages and skills needs in Europe. One of them is the skills overlay tool, which is being made by our agency Setofop. And this tool is giving an overview of local skills needs in Europe. So you can zoom in into regions of Europe to see to what extent there are skill shortages in certain occupations or sectors. And that's, of course, very useful also in this regard to be able to maybe in the future, not too far from now, to be able to match people from Ukraine and other countries that are coming to Europe, to match these with vacancies in other parts of Europe, and to show them where they should go if they have certain skills. And this tool has been launched last year, so it's still being improved, but it's a very useful tool, and yeah, I would like to recommend it to you all this year as well, to have a look and to maybe use it so as to use the EU skills profile tool. I will provide the links to both instruments in the chat. Thank you.
Yes, please. It would be excellent if you could post the links to the chat, to this in the chat, that you also see it. Just very shortly, how do actually Ukrainians know about this talent pool and where they can access the talent pool? Can you shortly, with whom do you cooperate in the countries?
Yeah, this is still being set up. So there's a governing board being, and the idea is that stakeholders on the ground in the member states will be involved in this. So yeah, of course, once this talent pool is there, it's important to reach the users also in all the member states that are working with Ukrainians. So this is a very important point. But work in progress, as I've said.
Okay, thank you. But did we actually stay very much in these competence checks or profiling? Because I know that in Austria there was, I think, in 2015 and 2016, you did in Malis and Anita, you did in the Austrian Public Employment Service something like a special competence check for women. Would be just interesting to hear from you. I mean, we spoke already beforehand a bit about that, and they said it's not really fitting now. Can you say what it is and why it is not fitting right now for the current situation?
First of all, I would like to mention that I think that the EMS and all the companies and other institutions that we got them, or we learned a lot from the flight movement 2015 and 2016. Now we know how to set up a lot of German courses, how much language knowledge is needed for the different professions, or we know how to assess the skills and organize separate regional placement, for instance. And maybe before I come to the competence checks, I would like to say what's the difference between now and 2015, besides that in the flight movement 2015, the education systems of the countries involved were less comparable than they are now in the case of the Ukraine. And it is assumed, as already mentioned, that the refugees from the Ukraine are well educated. So, and according to Eurostat, in the 30 and to 34 age group, more than half of the people in Ukraine, they have completed tertiary education. And it is not predictable now whether and to what extent the persons concerned will continue to migrate or return to their home country if possible, or whether they will remain in Austria. And this was different in 2015 as well. At that time, it could be assumed that the refugees concerned would mostly stay in Austria, and therefore long-term plans for education and training could also be made. And now coming to the competence checks and to your question, Martin, relating to the flight movement in 2015, the competence checks have made it possible to know what kind of services are needed in order to make people fit for the Austrian labor market. And now the access to the competence checks will be given as well, but there will be more focus on the job placement, owing to the reasons mentioned before, because we do not know if the refugees will remain in Austria. It is assumed that many of them are well trained and that they are well educated, and so on and so forth. And so, yes, there will be an access, but it will be a little bit different maybe. There will be another focus, I could say. And we think the coming weeks will be quite important for us, and we will learn we will know in some weeks much more about the people coming to us, and through our consultation, I think we will get more experience here.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it seems very much also learning by doing with regard to so many questions that are still open. Michael, I would like to turn to you now because
Martin, may I say some words? Sorry, just one last. Sorry, to the work permit maybe, because Lambert said, I think, something very important. He said a regular employment, a fair play and a fair job, and that's what we try to guarantee with the work permit, just to understand a little bit better the complexity of the Austrian system. So that's what we just wanted to add to the first question. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the clarification also. Michael, I wanted to turn to you because also with regard to profile and also how I think for Poland is specific that you have quite a big diaspora and workers already before the war of Ukrainians in Poland. Now would be for me interesting also, can these networks also play a significant role in labor market integration? I think it was mentioned by Jone already a bit in the Lithuanian context before, that there are some ties and some links, of course. Is there anything that the ministry can do to support such kind of private engagement of Ukrainians who already stayed before in Ukraine, in Poland?
Okay. For all your questions, on the answer in positive way. So, first of all, I would like to say that if we focus on this diaspora, we have to say that migration from Ukraine has been mainly economic and circular. Circularity in that case means that movements from Ukraine were not for long term. One of the reasons was that the employment of Ukrainian citizens were based on a very simplified procedures concerning in reporting employers' declarations about entrusting work to a citizen of Ukraine. And the last solutions, the last amendments of Polish regulations on labor market and foreigners even simplified it in much more way. So what the ministry may do, especially the Ministry of Family and Social Policy, turn into the launching special programs for integration Ukrainians. And the main task of the program is to support entities like NGOs, like non-governmental institutions, as I said, like institutions which have experience in the field of professional activation and integration. And that's it. We'll launching such programs, and we'll monitor the results. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think quite a similar question to you, Jone, also because also Lithuania had many migrants from Ukraine before, but actually with quite a different profile. I think mainly male workers, I think you said, and now mainly what we see so far, female, of course. How do you think that enterprises can adapt, and what kinds of jobs are actually in demand in Lithuania?
Probably one of the things, or one of the reasons why we adopt so quickly to the refugees from Ukraine is that on one hand, there's not something very new. We have quite many Ukrainians already employed. I also checked the statistics about minorities living in Lithuania. So of course, Ukraine is one of the biggest, and its size doubled in recent 5 years. So which means we already have the movement to Lithuania, though there were about 37,000 Ukrainians employed before the war. All of them, it was, okay, not all, but mainly it was men in transport. 33,000 in transport and 4,000 in construction. So roughly half of them now left back home to Ukraine to protect their country. Some of them moved their families to Lithuania before going to Ukraine. So there are some empty places left, even though according to the laws, the employers have to keep their working positions while they serve for their country, but still there are quite many empty working places. And the companies say they are ready to employ. They don't care about the gender of the worker. If they are willing, it's not a problem. But of course, we realize very well that now the refugees are mainly women with children. So of course, they cannot work as truck drivers, that's for sure. And so the profile of immigrants is completely different now. And based on those numbers, somehow it may seem that it's not a problem, but based on qualifications and profiles, it is a bit a problem. So far, our companies say that there are two biggest obstacles: language, one I mentioned, and childcare, as women has to take care of their children. So all this provision of the childcare is very important. There are private schools, private kindergartens, which opens classes for Ukrainians, giving a possibility for Ukrainians to be employed as well. There are also national or governmental schools and etc. But it's not happening so quickly. And in the biggest cities, we all, even Lithuanians, we have problem to find a place for our children in kindergarten. So now it's a big problem also when we have so many additional children coming. So it's completely another topic about education. But talking about skills, what I heard, it's again, I can say it's from the lower skill job to the higher skill jobs, which could be offered. There are quite many Lithuanian companies which had an office in Ukraine. And what they did now, they actually transferred their office to Lithuania together with all the workers who were willing to come here. So we also have Ukrainians working what they say exactly the same job. They say they are even sitting at exactly the same table, and they're doing exactly the same things that we used to do in Ukraine. Now it's just another city in another country, and of course we don't face problems with language and so on. So in general, there are big differences, very big differences in profiles of people who come. And I read a question in Q&A asking whether we have somewhere recorded. So not yet. I know with the statistics, the Office of Statistics is working on that so that we could see what are the professions that come here. And it's a bit pity that probably the people who have a higher qualification, it might be a problem for them to find a job which would match their qualification just because of not knowing the language. And then we will need to go to work of a lower qualification jobs. And that's gonna be a big challenge then, talking about the quality of life we can afford here and all the other things, especially if it's gonna last long.
Thank you, and also thank you also to showcase also this example that actually quite a company more or less from Ukraine starts or continues their work in Lithuania. I think this is also something that is a good way to keep up employment and to keep up livelihood actually at the end of the day, and to keep up the business and the livelihood that they had to continue. We spoke now in both in Poland and in Lithuania about how former ties, networks, diaspora also help to facilitate labor market integration or integration a bit more broadly. Marlene, at the beginning, I told shortly about the project Traffic, where we speak a lot about the importance of networks to find solutions for displaced people. From your experience, what networks does the private sector on the one side need, and what networks do refugees on the other side need to connect, to match? Dennis spoke a bit about these tools, but I think it needs more than just an online tool where you enter your data and your experiences. I think it's a lot of support also from both sides. What are your experiences here, and what can be done?
What we've learned about what do companies and employers need, from what we've learned about the last 6 years within our network, is that there are two main hurdles, which is on the one side the complicated legal framework, which is also linked to a fear of deportation. So the question, how long will employment be possible if I invest a lot personally and considering money and time, how long will we be able to work together? And then, of course, something we've talked about a lot is the language barrier. So for the first hurdle right now, things, as I've mentioned, will be a lot easier. But this doesn't change that employers are having questions about the legal framework as well, considering refugees from Ukraine. And of course, the temporary protection gives a perspective of 3 years. But in many jobs, and we can assume that employment will not start right now, so it will take a bit of time. So the perspective will be even shorter. And we don't even know if it's really 3 years, or it might be 2. So this is a question that I can foresee employers having as well. And my colleagues Marlies and Anita from Austria will know what I'm talking about for those Ukrainians coming here who are a bit younger and who might not have finished their education. The vocational training might be an important topic, which is something that the German-speaking countries are quite proud about, a system that's working quite well here to educate in a dual system within a company and a school, young people learning. So this is normally taking 3 years. So this is something we can really foresee. If you're starting within the system, are you able to finish it? There is a very as we find interesting caveat within the regulations of the temporary protection. I'm not sure if this exists in other countries and within the EU as well, is that it is you're explicably able to change into a status that is within the framework of immigration as a skilled worker. If you're seeking asylum in Germany, you're actually not, or just under very complicated circumstances, able to change lanes into this framework of status as a skilled worker. For those being here from Ukraine within this temporary protection, they are able. So this is going to be very interesting to see, will many of those being in work change into this framework and then securing a long-term status in Germany within another framework that has nothing to do with the temporary protection. So that's something we can only speculate about right now, but this is an interesting question as I find. So what remains is the language barrier. We've talked about already that access to all those measures, language courses and further education, tutoring, those things is possible, but then there remains the question, will we be able to have this number of free places within language courses? Will we be able to organize them efficiently? Will they be accessible for, as Jona mentioned, for people, for mothers with childcare needs? Will they have the time to participate? I think this is the most urgent question regarding employment. So as for employers, that's our main goal, being a network for employers. I think a network can serve two main things. This is to provide information and to make steps easier to go for those who come second and who can learn from the experiences of those who have been going those steps. That's something that we do day to day. We're not calling a lot of companies, trying to find out who is taking these first steps, what are they learning, what are important tips they have to provide for others. And then I think one thing that networks can provide that might not be as much of a hard fact is to provide some sense of motivation, to be in contact with other companies who are taking these often difficult steps, can really motivate and bring you further within your sense of urgency and keeping up this hard work. So this is what we've seen about the last years. And then the question is, what do refugees need? This is something that I don't have as much of immediate experience with, but that I've been watching over the last 6 years as well. Of course, there are a lot of structural needs that we've talked about: childcare, language courses, housing. I don't have to mention those again. And something that I can say about the German labor market, my experience is that German employers are having quite high expectations regarding language skills, but also education, and sometimes even formalized education, certificates. That's something that's quite typically German to have a main focus on do you have the certificate that can prove what you're telling me, and how can I know what you have learned if you don't have a certificate that proves it without a question. And this is something that's certainly important for refugees to have some support system to organize their steps towards meeting those demands. And we've talked a lot about the differences in educational systems, but I can see what I've learned over the last years is that the expertise and knowledge that you have is the one thing, and to be able to prove and communicate this expertise without language skills is something very different, and it can be extremely frustrating if you have the expertise, but you can't really communicate it and transport it if you're lacking the language skills to get them across. So I think that's something that both sides have been learning a lot over the last 6 years and will have to learn more. Employers on the one hand, and those coming with a refugee background, seeking employment. How can we make the difference between expertise and language skills and not confuse them all the time? And where is language skill really necessary for working, and where can we find a workaround? So that's something that's been really exciting for me to watch over the last years, and will certainly be interesting for this group of people as well to watch.
Thank you, Marlene. Thank you all for your reflections. Now, I just what you just pointed out, this challenges for employers, what you mentioned. I think this temporality of temporary protection is something that was already beforehand a bit thought. How does this work together with this promise or this idea of labor market integration or integration more in general? While at the other side you have this temporary status always, which might be also very difficult to communicate to employers, and in order to also to a certain extent invest in employees. I also very thankful for this German practice with this Spurwechsel, this change of lane from the humanitarian asylum status into a legal status, employer status. Also, I think a good, interesting practice. We are a bit longer than we expected, but I very much appreciated this exchange. Now we will come now to summarize a bit of the questions. And before I hand over to you, Justina, I indeed forgot to introduce Marlies and Anita. The background, the AMS means Arbeitsmarktservice, which is the public employment service in Austria. This was one of the questions in the chat. I just wanted to take this immediately. This was my mistake. I did not post it. There are quite a few questions, and I would ask Justina to summarize them and to bring to the panelists where they were referred to. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. Indeed, we gathered a bunch of very interesting questions. Fortunately, some of them, or even many, have been answered already. So my task is much easier. I would say that the questions that we have center around skills recognition and potential brainwaves, the temporarity of the status, and mobility of beneficiaries of temporary protection. So regarding the skills recognition, the questions from our online audience is actually what can be done to speed up the process of recognition, considering the length of the status. Here, I suppose that we can look at the examples, practices from post 2015-16 arrivals, but also some windows of opportunities opened also during the COVID pandemic. So that's the first questions. How can we simplify the whole process? Then the temporality. How can we actually encourage employers to be eager, to be open to Ukrainian workers? And that's the follow-up question to what Marlene was covering. And finally, a couple of questions regarding the potential mobility of workers, meaning that if there is no job matching my skills, whether it's possible to smoothly transition to other labor markets. So these three questions, I invite you to pick and choose whatever is relevant for your work. But I have one more task since we are running out of time. We would like to hear the final statement from your side. 3 top priorities, issues that need to be addressed to facilitate the access to or inclusion into the labor market. What 3 priorities you see for your country or for EU in general, on the top of the questions that I listed? Is there a volunteer who would like to be first?
I can be first.
Go ahead, Jonna.
Maybe I'm not going to answer all of the questions, but the idea that came to my mind when we talk about temporarity, that actually it's not only about employers, but also about Ukrainians' attitude. It's not that every of the refugees come here as for making their lives. I know that there are people who just say that we are here for a few weeks and we are not doing any actions towards integration, nor of themselves, nor of their children. And this is on both sides. And of course, we don't know, none of us knows how long it's gonna last. And this is probably one, it also matches to one of the challenges I mentioned for myself or written down for myself, that this time horizon, which is unknown, and probably we should, how to say, prepare that it's gonna last forever and just do what we have to do. While controversially to German issue, somehow we don't find, our companies in Lithuania don't find this a very big problem. They really address this to Ukrainians as if they were Lithuanians, but just with not knowing the language, let's say. And regarding another big challenge, which is diploma in acceptance or recognition, we also see just the problem in a sectors which is very necessary, like schooling and medical care mainly. In all the other private sectors, it's not an issue. Private companies, they don't even ask us Lithuanians to provide a diploma. They test your knowledge, and that's enough. So that's again not a big problem. While how to solve it, it's really a question, because part of the refugees, they don't have the papers with themselves as well. And then it's really, they can't even show anything because they just ran away and without having the documents. And probably we should simply trust or test the knowledge. Maybe this is the employment agencies which could also help and provide the help. And the third challenge is just the legal environment, which is probably what I mentioned in the very beginning. This is the initial step all the local governments probably needs to do in order to make this integration as quick and as easy as possible. And despite the laws which concerns employment, we should also, or the government should also think about all the social security, because the people who are coming here, they're very socially vulnerable. They are not coming for work here, and they apply to labor market just because they need money to live. It's not because they are willing somehow to work. They need money to live. Okay, we need some of them say they need activity to do, not to think about home and what happened. But there is the package of social protection which should come together, so that those people could feel comfortable as they can feel comfortable in these circumstances, and so to have enough of whatever is needed for themselves and for children. So that's probably my major topics or points. Thank you. Justina, you should put your microphone.
Yes, thank you very much, Jonna. Who would like to continue, Anita? And
yeah, we continue. We have three main challenges we see is one, first, language courses. Then second, the mobility within Austria, so moving from maybe the east to the west or to the south. And the third challenge we see is childcare, as a lot of women are coming. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Marlene, would you like to continue?
Yes, I would love to. Actually, I don't have anything new to provide, because I've written down, and I can prove it because I've written it down, exactly the same points: language skills, childcare, and a good matching. That's all the things we've heard about. Maybe one short addition in my experience: a good matching often is done by people, by persons, by people talking to the one side and talking to the other sides. This can be employment agencies, but there are other actors who are active in this field who are quite important. So this, I think, is an important group to keep in mind as well. And something I've added after hearing a unit talk and just really wanting to second what you said is peace of mind, because I do think that the question, do I have the mental space to seek work, and not only to seek it, but to then pick up work and to work in a new field, work in a new company, work in a language that I'm not familiar with, no matter what my language skills are in the language we're talking about, is something we can all imagine how hard this is. And now with the situation in Ukraine being so uncertain, this is something we've heard quite a lot of stories about as well, that this is now a very big question, that this psychological element is now more than ever. I think this will keep up for quite a while, be very important.
Thank you very much. I would suggest to move to Michał and then to Lambert or Denise to close this round.
Okay. Well, if I have to recall one or two main challenges, I would say that from my point of view, very important will be ensure the mental help for those people who are experienced by such big trauma. And maybe a second problem is to ensure accommodation, because now many of refugees from Ukrainian are accommodated in private dwellings, and very important will be to find a solution for this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Lambert or Dennis, and the small reminder that the question targeted to you was related to mobility of a benefit.
We understood
protection.
So we had some more time to reflect on the answers. I would suggest that I start and Denis complements. So that's okay for Denis. I can't see him anymore, but I know that he's still there. Okay, now I think the question from Maria in the chat. So this is about free movement. Well, the situation is a bit complicated, and the Commission is actually working currently on providing some guidance with regard to the Articles 12 and 13 of the Directive on temporary protection. So that should come out sooner or later. I don't know actually when, but I know that we are in my unit working on a text. And so the situation right now is there is no free movement of workers. So if there's a candidate or if there's a person triggering the temporary protection status in one country, in principle, he remains in that country. Of course, he can go to another country, to another member state, and ask as well to trigger these status. But then it is these member states to decide if they want to grant it. So this is the difference. I mean, in the first country, it is a right. That's at least my understanding, and in the second one, it's somehow optional if the member states wants to do it. And in that case, of course, if they do it, then they can. This person can get then the labor market access. At the same time, there must be a mechanism in place that the status from the first country that was granted must be revoked. So I cannot tell you the details. That's how we see the situation right now, but that's a little bit under reserve. There are really a lot of legal questions behind it. What we have already said and written to member states that these implementations should be should be applied with the biggest flexibility that is possible. But it's a competence of the member states to put that in place. So I don't think I can say more on that. And there was a question of brain drain. Yeah, it's true. So a lot of mobile workers in the EU or from third countries, they are overqualified for the jobs that they're working in. That's maybe something to think about as well in terms of skills development and recognition of skills and so on. And I wouldn't see a current brain drain from Ukraine because these people are fleeing the war. So I don't think it's a voluntary decision, and actually nobody knows how the situation will be in a year if they want to go back or not. I cannot believe that everyone would like to stay here. I mean, they had their lives before. I could imagine that there might be some movements, but I simply don't know it. So that's only a guess. I think there was as well some question on skills, which I leave to Dennis, and I will be short on my wish list or whatever we want to call it. I take two, and I leave then one for Dennis. My 2 points would be what we really need is information to the people on the ground, to the employers, to the member states. We need to exchange between all of us, and ideally in the right language. So the language to the employers is certainly not Ukrainian, but they must be the national languages. But for those that are not speaking any of the EU official language, it should be then in the right language, obviously. And this poses a lot of problems on all of our organizations because we will need to provide that translation. And the second one is a very simple one. My second wish or priority, I think we could say that in every crisis we will need to work together. And I do not think it's only between Brussels and the member states. It is between all the organizations that help the integration. It is not only the Public Employment Service or the employers associations. It is the NGOs. It is the organizations of Ukrainian people already living here, and so on and so on. So there are really a lot of people and organizations that need to work together. Thank you. I think I'm talking too much. So if Denis is still around, maybe he can complement. And
he is. Danny, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the risk of being the last one is that all the points that I want to say on the challenges are already said by the panelists, but I can say a few words on the thing on brain waste and recognition. Particularly brain waste, that we've seen that in the past that people that are mobile also within Europe have been working below their level, and how can you address that? I think it's important there to use the tools we are making to support recognition. We developed the European qualifications framework to make sure that recognition diplomas can go more smoothly when people are moving across borders. Also, in the case of Ukraine, we even started a comparison pilot of the European qualifications framework with the Ukrainian qualifications framework last October. This pilot was not completely finished, but we're trying to finalize this, even with people from Ukraine at the moment. So this is very promising and can be very useful for people from Ukraine that go to Europe at this moment. So we are hoping this work will be finalized and will lead to a final report which can be used by, for example, recognition services in Europe. I think that's it from my side. Most points were already made. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our conversation today. We finished today, but we will for sure continue in the future, picking up on more detailed topics covered today. If I were to summarize our long discussion in 2-3 sentences, I would say yeah, we should think about the urgent issues, the ecosystem first, because we are still discussing the labor market inclusion of refugees, not Ukrainian workers. We should remember that it's women, children, and seniors arriving. That's my second sentence already. And the third is that the big question that we should address is really the profiles of people entering market, and the question to what extent they match the available vacancies, and how we deal with that, meaning the early competence checks, fast tracking, recognition of qualifications, and what you all mentioned, the need of language competences. If this is not addressed, then we face the problem of underemployment and what Denis mentioned, the brain waste or even brain loss. Let me conclude in thanking all of you for your time and interesting insights. Thank you all to all our viewers and listeners, wherever you are. And I would like to hand over to Martin to make small announcement and officially close our webinar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Justine, and also thanks from my side to all panelists. I really enjoyed this conversation. There were quite a few things that I much appreciated, new insights, and it shows me again that as much as within the EU we are exchanging, there's always more need to understand what other countries do, because there are some differences that we see. We tried to address all questions that came in. I saw that there were some more questions now popping in. We will try to find a way to answer them. I would like to have 3 statements at the end. First, there will be a recording of this session you will find on the Traffic webpage. As soon as we have the recording done, you will give it there, and probably we'll find also a way then to summarize the questions that still came in. I also took the liberty to do some advertisement in the chat function. Please, if you have more if you are more interested about the work on ISMPD on Ukraine and related issues, please follow the blog that I shared. Also, with regard to the Spring project, there's also a link that you can see for more information. And finally, from Traffic, our project ends very soon. We have a final conference, and it will take place on 3rd of May in Brussels. We will do it in person, but also online. You can already register at our webpage, and I would be happy to see some of you. We will discuss related issues also there. With this, I would like to conclude this webinar, and I really hope that this temporariness that we have in this directive will stay temporary, that the situation will sooner than later be at a level that people can seriously return in a safe manner, and that this war will soon end. I will keep it with this, and want to thank you once more time, all panelists, and have a good afternoon, evening. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.